Hello and welcome back or welcome to our channel. Today we are reviewing page 11 of the little brown booklet entitled Kamatthana. It's available as an ebook and can be downloaded from a site on this channel if you'd like to follow along. I'm actually going to start at the bottom of page 10 under the category of practice. And there's the quotation, I think again, "To conquer yourself is the greatest victory." So, of all the rewards, all the trophies, all the gold medals, all the recognition for accomplishments that we might achieve in the world, in the public domain, Lord Buddha says there's no greater victory than to be the master of the mind. So let's see what that looks like as a practice and as opposed to a theory or a philosophy or a theology. So here's a quote. "I have never seen any undertaking to be as difficult as the practice of mental development." For those of you who are new to the forest monk tradition, Ajahn Mahabhuwa was a 20th century fully liberated forest monk who had wide national recognition within Thailand, is a even kind of folk hero. He wrote a number of very popular books that have been translated into English, and if you can find those online, I encourage you to do so. So, at the top of page 11, here's another quote. "Hard it is to go forth from home to homelessness. To take delight in it is hard." This is a quote, if I'm not mistaken, from the Pali Canon. It's referring to the life of a monk, but we can convert it, use it as a guide to our own practice. It's very difficult to give up the pleasures that we're so accustomed to, that we've been taught by our culture to value. They're fun, they're exciting, they're sensual, they taste good, they look good, they smell good, etc. And to turn our backs on those in an effort to see if there's an alternative, if there's some other kind of lifestyle, some other kind of consciousness that might compete in its own way with those pleasures that we experience through the six sense doors. Samana, it says, "Forgive me, I'm not a scholar. I've never learned the Pali language, and I'm bound to mispronounce most of the Pali words. I include them in the booklet for those of you who are interested in foreign languages and hope that might be helpful. Samana, it's one who strives, one who has made a profound commitment to spiritual practice." And now here we see it's anyone, it's a lay person, a monk, a nun, old or young, etc., who it has made a profound commitment, not a casual one, not seeking information, curiosity about Buddha's teachings, but someone who has determined that they really do wish to make an effort to see if these teachings are factual if they really do end in a profound experience that is life-altering, life-changing, and that commitment can be talked about as right effort, can be talked about patient perseverance, strong determination. These are qualities that we'll be seeing later in the booklet. There is no fixed method of practice. Here I have capitalized the word practice. It's the practice of the Dhamma, not practicing the piano or some other skill we might have in the world, however valuable. And it says that there are choices in the forest monk tradition. Very typically, the teacher won't tell you exactly how to practice. They give you some options. They encourage us to experiment and find a practice that's suitable to our personality, that we seem to resonate with. For quite a long time, I practiced a form of Vipassana meditation that was dictated to me as the way that I must practice. There were timers and sort of ritualized behaviors, and I tried desperately to be proficient, to gain skills and the benefits of that practice over a number of years, and finally realized this is sort of not working. This just doesn't feel right for me. And I stress that for many, the practice was very appropriate. In my case, it wasn't, and I ended up finding another practice which really suited me. And as a result, there was real obvious signs of change, or what we might call progress, once I found the practice that was best for my character. The practitioner has to find the technique that suits them. Now, the only caution that I have here is if you're digging a well for water and you dig down 10 feet and you're not successful, and you start another hole, dig down 10 feet, or we could say practice for a few months or maybe a year, and you continually do this 10 or 20 times, it's unlikely you'll ever find water. You never get deeper than the 10 feet. So there is this tension between pushing through discomfort, frustration, disappointment, doubt, with the confidence that if you stick with it, you can be successful. So there's the tension. Every time we hit a bump on the path, it's not appropriate to say this technique doesn't work. It may be just that this is a kind of test or a challenge, and just like climbing a mountain, there are certainly parts of the climb that I'm sure mountain climbers feel like they'd like to give up. The next sentence says, an incompatible technique with which the meditator feels no sense of connection or enthusiasm leads to discouragement and regress. So the very opposite of progress. Unfortunately, there are no signposts on the path of Dhamma that say, 2 more years to reach Nibbana or Nirvana, 1 more year or 10 more minutes, you're on the right path, don't give up. At least in my own experience, I always had doubt I still have doubt from time to time. So patient perseverance with strong determination is a virtue that we simply must develop to its fullest extent. And yet we should always be mindful that this may not be our teacher, this may not be our way, and I don't have the magic answer, the magic solution for how you will ever know. In my own case, I changed techniques and teachers a number of times, and in hindsight, I'm really glad I did. I did end up with a fully liberated teacher who, once we met and my practice was altered, there was a rapid progress. So this word, pariyatti, it means the theoretical or book understanding. So it's being a bookworm. It's what you can find in books or videos, what you can hear from other teachers. It says, not a single kilesa, that's a form of suffering, it's a form of ignorance that's let loose like a wild animal in our mind all day, every day, can be eliminated by memorizing, reading. So it's stressing to us that book learning is very, very different from practice. In the secular world, getting a good education is valued, and it should be. Usually, people with higher education levels earn more money and have opportunities because of their education that may not be available to others. So in the secular world, we go to school, we're taught something, we have to memorize it sufficiently to pass tests and to prove that we've understood the subject matter. However, in the practice of the Dhamma, that is a first step, it's not a final step. So briefly, we have to familiarize ourselves with the teaching. And second, we have to have an understanding of the vocabulary and the intent of the teaching sufficient that we could talk about it. We could, quote, pass a test that we've heard of that teaching, we understand it sufficiently to be able to articulate our understanding. That would be passing the test on a secular level. But in the practice of Dhamma, there's a third essential step, and that is we have to convert the intellectual understanding of some teaching into a heart experience. Then we're no longer speaking from memory, we're speaking from our own direct experience, and nobody can steal that from us, and nobody can, out-argue us using a logic or some other skillful, rational means. And if we haven't had the direct experience, it has just remains, I'm going to say, in the brain. And in Forest Monk tradition, we talk about the pure Dhamma as arising or originating from the heart. So the next sentence says, the chitta, that's a Pali word, also a Sanskrit word, for the mind of a person who memorizes the whole of the scriptures is still tainted by these kilesa. So in the Pali canon in Thailand, it varies from language to language how a language that expresses, there are more than 40 volumes of what are considered the teachings of the Buddha. In Burma, there are people alive today who have memorized the entire Pali Canon, and they are tested on a regular basis. And they sit down and they close their eyes. There will be the tester, who is usually a monk. They pick up volume 1, and the person who has such a great memory starts reciting, and he's not allowed to miss any word, not a single word. And it takes hours and hours, obviously, sometimes days, to recite all the 40 plus volumes of the Pali Canon. However, that person is not liberated. They may be a rascal. They may have a failed marriage, or be a bad parent, or a criminal even in their work, because memorizing is not the way to purify the mind. That was also a quote from the teacher I mentioned previously, Mahabua. He's deceased. He died in the early 2000s. The next quote says, "Don't read books, read your mind." Well, again, here's a great contrast between the way we're taught to learn something in our school system, or in any country, any culture's school system, tells us that the more we read, the smarter we are, and the smarter we are, maybe the better life we'll have. Somehow there should be a payback to us for being very smart. There are some paybacks. We might get a Nobel Prize. We might get a raise or a promotion in our field. We may do well in the stock market. But none of these things calm the mind. None of these abilities, intellectual abilities, open the heart to loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, or equanimity. I wouldn't say to anyone who is learning, beginning to learn, don't read books. By all means, just don't depend on books, and constantly challenge yourself to see how what you're learning is changing the way the mind works. How is it changing daily mental attitudes? How is it improving relationships you might have, relationships at work or in the family, between a spouse, etc.? If there aren't changes in the world, then you haven't yet deepened your understanding of the lessons you're trying to learn. Here's another quote from Ajahn Mahabua. "The Lord Buddha and his noble disciples became enlightened by practicing mental development, not by studying and memorizing the Buddhist canon." The canon just means the scriptures that the Theravada tradition recognizes as authentic teachings from the Buddha. A couple reasons the monks didn't memorize the canon is there wasn't any at the time Buddha was living. He taught for about 40 years. He repeated himself for about 40 years. And it was several centuries before those teachings were put to pen, before they were written down and recognized as truly being the teachings of the Buddha. And at the time of the Buddha, and for many, many, many centuries afterwards, 99% of the people couldn't read or write, and books were a very rare thing, very, very rare. But the point being, the Buddha did not become enlightened reading a book, mastering a second language, nor did any of his disciples. The successes they had were the result of their meditation and mindfulness practice. There's going to be 3 words that start with P here that are forms of practice. The first one is we have to introduce ourselves to the teaching. We're going to do that, nowadays on YouTube or other social media or books, as well as retreats that we might go on. The second Pali word is patapati, and it says, the definition might be, practice of Dhamma to remove kilesa and the development of moral excellence. So there'll be a better definition of kilesa a little later in the book, but for right now, it's those thoughts, those emotions, those belief systems, those theologies, philosophies that we have about who we are, what life is, that are not accurate, they're not healthy, they're not true, in fact, they're delusional. So this patapati is the practice to remove these ideas, these beliefs, these superstitions, these rites or rituals, or whatever form they take, so that we can develop moral excellence. We're going to see that moral excellence is the foundation of our meditation practice. If we cannot live by 5 precepts that the Buddha says are essential, we can't just pick the ones we like. We must be devoted to have a profound commitment to 5 precepts that constitute the foundation of a good moral conduct. So here's some encouraging words. Apart from virtue, wisdom has no worth. So we all know stories of people in positions of authority. They could be religious leaders, ministers, pastors, priests, monks, etc., from any religion, who are excellent speakers. They have large followings, and then we learn later that they don't have the virtue that they preach or teach about in their Dhamma talks, in their sermons, etc. So the use of the word wisdom here is usually reserved for the wisdom we get from our own direct experience of the Dhamma, and not from books. But in this case, they're using it to say, no matter how smart you might be, without virtue, you're bankrupt. There's another quotation. Be determined in practicing virtue and keep on meditating. This teacher, for those of you not familiar, is Ajahn Chah. He and Mahabua were contemporaries in the latter half of the 20th century. They almost single-handedly developed and promoted the forest monk tradition. They were the first teachers to accept Western students, especially in Ajahn Chah's case. He didn't speak any foreign languages, and over the remainder of his life, he had Western disciples who ordained as monks, stayed with him for years, became fluent in the Thai language, and many of them, the ones who stayed ordained, returned to their countries, England, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Canada, and opened meditation centers or monasteries in the forest monk tradition, associated with direct connection with Ajahn Chah or Mahabua. The next one says, right practice is suffering that is the end of suffering. I didn't really comment on Ajahn Chah's quotation, be determined in practicing virtue and keep on meditating. So there's a three-legged stool, and three legs are sila, that's a Pali word for virtue or morality, meditation or concentration, and the third leg of the stool is wisdom. So you take one of those legs out, the stool is useless. It's a piece of furniture that's useless. So we must daily, continually watch what the mind is thinking, what words are coming out of our mouth, and what behaviors we are expressing, to be certain they're in harmony with the 5 precepts which are the foundation of virtue. And then we must continually practice meditation. So virtue, meditation, and wisdom. Those are a trilogy that are one way of talking about the path of Dhamma. The last sentence on the page, right practice is suffering that is the end of suffering. So in the West, at least in my culture, we don't want any form of discomfort, nothing. Everything should be comfortable, and if it's not, we want what the advertisers call a fast relief. We don't want to wait for our food more than a couple minutes at the drive-in, and so on. We want our Amazon package the next day, etc., etc. Find your own examples in your own life where impatience arises when something isn't happening fast enough. So impatience is a form of suffering. Sitting in meditation without moving for longer periods of time is physically painful. And yet we are encouraged to become the master over the body. And we won't ever be successful in that effort if every time we become have some pain in our knee, our ankle, our back, our shoulders, our neck, wherever it arises, a feeling of a bug crawling on our face or an insect buzzing around, and we're swatting at it, we're adjusting our posture over and over again. This craving, this need to always be comfortable is a kilesa. It's a form of ignorance that we must defeat. And with practice, just like I often think of athletes and how hard they train and how they go from simple, let's say weightlifting, maybe somebody starting for the first time, goes to a gym and they put 5-pound weights on the bar on either end, and they do their best to do some repetitions with 5 pounds. You come back months or years later, they may be putting 100 pounds on each end, maybe more, if you watch these weightlifters contests. So it's a process. We have to overcome our hatred, our resistance, our annoyance, that we're not comfortable, emotionally or physically comfortable. We just keep trying. Okay, that's the end of page 11 today, and I'm going to stop here. We've reached about 30 minutes. We'll start the next time on page 12. If you feel there was benefit in this discourse, I hope you would consider pressing like and possibly subscribing, with the hope that these Dhamma talks might reach other sincere, dedicated students of the practice, might inspire someone to take up the practice. So that's a way you can be a blessing in the world, by sharing what you consider to have blessed your life. Thanks again for listening.